Beneath the blazing Egyptian sun, deep in the Valley of the Kings, a staircase hidden beneath layers of sand revealed the entrance to a sealed tomb. The door was intact, its ancient plaster unbroken, its secrets untouched for over 3,000 years. What waited behind that door would stun the world. An undisturbed burial chamber packed with gold, sacred relics, and the body of a forgotten pharaoh, a boy king whose name was once erased from history and then resurrected in a single moment of discovery. This wasn't just another archaeological dig. It was a gateway into a lost world, a world of gods, curses, power, and death. On November 4, 1922, beneath the blistering sun of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, a moment of quiet suspense changed the course of archaeology forever. British archaeologist Howard Carter, weathered by years of fruitless digging and dwindling hope, brushed away dust from a sunken stone. A step, then another. 17 in total. They descended into the bedrock, each one a whisper from the ancient world. At the base, a sealed doorway. Its plaster was still intact, astonishingly untouched. On it, royal cartouches, names that belonged to none other than Tutankhamun, the boy king who had become almost mythical in his obscurity. Standing at the threshold, Carter summoned Lord Carnarvon, the aristocratic financier who had long bankrolled the expedition. Nervous and breathless, Carnarvon asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter leaned forward, inserted a chisel into a small crevice, and made a hole just wide enough to peer through. Candlelight flickered through the gap. What he saw was beyond imagination. "Yes," he whispered, "wonderful things." And they were. Behind that sealed entrance lay over 5,000 artifacts, stacked, scattered, and glittering like treasure from a dream. Gilded statues of ancient gods, thrones inlaid with lapis lazuli, chariots folded for storage but preserved with divine elegance, furniture, garments, and weapons perfectly frozen in time. And in the center of it all, what Carter had long suspected but never dared to hope, the unviolated sarcophagus of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Photographs taken by Harry Burton captured these relics with haunting beauty. Sepia-toned and ethereal, they give us our first glimpse into a world that had not been seen in over 3,000 years. No tomb had ever been found so intact. No excavation had ever revealed so many wonders. This was not merely a burial site, it was a time capsule from the very soul of ancient Egypt. The discovery wasn't just an academic triumph, it ignited a global sensation. Newspapers from London to New York splashed Carter's name across headlines. Egyptomania gripped the West, influencing fashion, architecture, film, and even inspiring conspiracy theories. But beneath the excitement was something deeper, the realization that for all our modern marvels, the ancient world still had secrets it was willing to share if we listened carefully enough. KV62, Tutankhamun's tomb, is deceptively small. In a necropolis filled with vast, labyrinthine burial sites for pharaohs and nobles, his tomb almost seems modest by comparison. And yet, it holds a universe within. The antechamber, the first room Carter entered, appeared chaotic but sacred. Golden beds shaped like divine animals, the cow, the lioness, and the hippo rested atop one another. Disassembled chariots leaned against the walls, their leather harnesses still intact. Boxes were piled haphazardly, their hieroglyphs revealing contents meant not for display, but for eternity. Then came the annex, a tight, jumbled space that resembled a storeroom of the divine. It was cluttered with food offerings, jars of wine, and alabaster vessels containing perfumed oils. The placement was not careless, it was ceremonial. These were provisions for the afterlife, carefully included so the king would never hunger or thirst in the world beyond. The heart of the tomb was the burial chamber. Unlike the other rooms, this space was richly adorned. Its walls bore sacred paintings that depicted Tutankhamun's journey into the afterlife. He was shown meeting Osiris, the god of the underworld, and performing rituals of rebirth. In the center stood a massive stone sarcophagus, and within it, a nested series of gilded coffins, each fitting perfectly within the next, like a puzzle of eternal sleep. The innermost coffin, made of solid gold, cradled the mummified remains of the young king himself. Finally, the treasury, the final chamber, held objects that were profoundly spiritual. Guarded by a statue of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, it housed the canopic shrine, an ornate container that held the king's preserved internal organs, each in its own protective jar. There were also statues of deities, funerary boats, and chests filled with ceremonial tools and amulets meant to guide Tutankhamun through the perilous trials of the underworld. Even today, scholars and digital artists attempt to reconstruct these rooms through 3D models and virtual walkthroughs, but they often fall short of capturing the sacred geometry the Egyptians so meticulously embedded within. Every corner, every object placement had symbolic meaning. Nothing was random. Tutankhamun's tomb may be small in square footage, but it's vast in cosmic significance. It is both a puzzle and a prayer, a four-room cathedral to the belief that life continues after death, and that kings, even boy kings, ascend to something greater. Among the thousands of wonders unearthed in Tutankhamun's tomb, one artifact stands above the rest, not in size, but in symbolism. The golden death mask, forged from over 22 pounds of solid gold and inlaid with striking semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli, carnelian, quartz, obsidian, and turquoise. This mask wasn't merely decorative, it was spiritual armor. Crafted with supernatural precision, its serene gaze was designed to guide the young pharaoh into eternity, transforming him into Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Every detail, from the etched false beard to the cobra and vulture on the brow, reinforced his divine status. It was art, identity, and religion fused into a single, breathtaking relic. But the mask was just the beginning. Among the most emotionally powerful pieces was Tutankhamun's golden throne. Unlike other cold portrayals of kingship, the throne showed a rare moment of affection. The boy king seated, while his queen, Ankhesenamun, gently applies oils to his shoulder. The intimacy of the scene stunned historians. It offered a glimpse into the personal world of a ruler often seen only through the lens of his tomb. Then there were the canopic jars, 4 in total, each carved and painted with immense care. These were not ordinary vessels. They were designed to hold the preserved organs of the pharaoh, each protected by a specific deity. Placed inside a shrine that mirrored the architecture of a temple, these jars symbolized spiritual protection, ensuring that the body would remain whole in the afterlife. 6 chariots were discovered in total, some with real signs of wear, hinting they were used during the young king's life. Others appeared ceremonial, modified or reassembled to fit the burial chamber. Their presence underscored Tutankhamun's royal stature and his potential role as a warrior king, even if his health may have told a different story. And at the center of this golden trove lay the three nested coffins, designed like a set of divine Russian dolls. The outer two were richly gilded wood, layered with precious inlays, but the innermost, crafted entirely from over 240 pounds of solid gold, was the crown jewel. It encased the mummified remains of the young pharaoh, hugging his body with a sheen of divinity that even time couldn't tarnish. These were not simply burial goods. They were instruments of transformation, objects forged to immortalize. The ancient Egyptians believed that craftsmanship was a sacred act, that to make something perfect was to make it eternal. And within the walls of KV-62, perfection lived in every corner. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a coronation in death, a final ritual of deification. Tutankhamun was not being mourned, he was being reborn. For all the majesty entombed with him, Tutankhamun's story is a tragedy. He died around the age of 19, still barely more than a teenager, with the crown of Egypt resting heavy on a body that was visibly broken. For decades, the cause of his death was a mystery ripe for speculation. Early researchers pointed to a fracture at the base of his skull and speculated about murder, a conspiracy in the court, a strike from behind. But modern science told a different story. In the 2000s, advanced CT scans proved that the head trauma occurred after death, likely during the rushed mummification process. The murder theory lost its grip. Instead, what emerged was a more complex and somber narrative. Tutankhamun's parents were likely siblings, a revelation confirmed by DNA analysis. That royal inbreeding, while politically strategic in its time, carried serious genetic consequences. The boy king suffered from a cascade of congenital disorders, a club foot which would have made walking painful, feminine hips and a slight, fragile frame, a cleft palate and an elongated skull, all traits inherited, not earned. His remains show no signs of athleticism or strength, no evidence of the warrior king imagined in some murals. One of the most accepted theories points to a fractured leg, possibly the result of an accident or fall. Left untreated in a time with no antibiotics, that injury may have become infected, contributing to a rapid decline. But perhaps the final blow was an invisible one. Malaria, confirmed by genetic tests, was present in Tutankhamun's body. A mosquito bite may have delivered the parasite that overwhelmed his compromised immune system. If true, it paints a tragic picture. A boy, already weakened by his lineage, felled by the smallest of killers. His body was in such poor condition when Carter found it that the embalming had largely failed. The skin was burned, the mummy was broken. The preservation that had worked so well for other pharaohs had, in Tutankhamun's case, failed him miserably. And yet his story endured, ironically not because of his reign, but because his tomb remained hidden for so long. His death may have been swift, but his afterlife became eternal. In the end, Tutankhamun left behind no epic conquests or grand monuments, but his fragile, gilded legacy, pieced together through science, artifacts, and myth, has echoed through time with a resonance few rulers ever achieve. Just months after the tomb of Tutankhamun was opened, the man who made it all possible, Lord Carnarvon, was dead. A simple mosquito bite on his cheek, left untreated, became infected. He developed blood poisoning and died shortly after in Cairo. The timing? Eerie. The location? Haunting. The press couldn't resist. Headlines screamed, "Death comes on swift wings to he who enters the tomb." The curse of the pharaoh was born. And the deaths didn't stop there, at least not in the headlines. Over the following years, several people connected to the excavation died unexpectedly. A radiologist who examined the mummy died of illness. An aristocrat who visited the tomb committed suicide. A member of the excavation team died of arsenic poisoning. Accidents, strange illnesses, even car crashes, all began to feed into the growing narrative that the tomb was protected by a supernatural force. Was it vengeance from beyond the grave? Had Carter and his team truly disturbed something that was never meant to be found? The reality, however, is far less cinematic. Modern historians and scientists have repeatedly debunked the so-called curse. Of the dozens involved in the tomb's opening and documentation, most lived long, healthy lives, including Howard Carter himself, who lived another 17 years after the discovery. Still, logic doesn't always win against fear. The sheer power of the legend, the uncanny timing, the media frenzy, the mystique of ancient Egypt created a myth that endures even today. It speaks to something deeper, a primal unease about disturbing the dead, especially a king whose afterlife was meticulously prepared over 3,000 years ago. Whether coincidence or something more, the curse of the pharaoh remains a chilling footnote to the greatest archaeological discovery in history. Tutankhamun may have ruled briefly and died young, but in death, he achieved something no pharaoh before him had: global fame. After the tomb's discovery, the world was swept into a fever. Tutmania exploded in the 1920s and 30s, a wave of cultural fascination that blurred the lines between archaeology and pop culture. In the West, Egyptian motifs infiltrated every corner of life. The bold lines and sacred shapes of hieroglyphics appeared on jewelry and clothing. Sphinxes and scarabs were carved into furniture. In cities like Paris, London, and New York, entire buildings were constructed in Art Deco styles, inspired by pharaonic tombs. Even Hollywood followed suit, releasing films that borrowed heavily from Egyptian themes, both real and imagined. Tutankhamun, once an obscure and forgotten monarch, was suddenly the face of ancient Egypt. His golden mask became one of the most recognizable images on Earth. Museums, fashion designers, filmmakers, and spiritualists all drew from the mystique surrounding his tomb. Even the boy king's name, difficult to pronounce for many Westerners, was shortened simply to King Tut, a nickname that added familiarity to his newfound celebrity. Later, as international exhibitions of his artifacts toured the globe, millions stood in line for hours just for a glimpse of his burial treasures. People wept upon seeing the mask. Some bowed, others stood in stunned silence. The death of a teenager had become the rebirth of a legend. Today, the vast majority of Tutankhamun's treasures are kept in Egypt, housed in what is destined to become one of the most important archaeological institutions in the world. The Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza, just outside Cairo, built to display the full wealth of ancient Egyptian civilization. The museum is a tribute not just to the past, but to the rediscovery of it. At its heart are the artifacts of KV62, the tomb of the boy king. Among the items now either on display or preserved within its vaults, the golden funerary mask, still dazzling after more than 3 millennia, all 3 sarcophagi, including the innermost made of solid gold. Dozens of amulets and rings, once believed to protect Tutankhamun's spirit in the afterlife. Weapons, intricately designed but never used in battle. Chariots with woodwork so delicate it had to be reinforced before transport. Thrones, statues, and ceremonial garments, each a masterpiece of divine symbolism and royal craftsmanship. The sheer number of objects, over 5,000, was so overwhelming that it took decades to catalogue, clean, and preserve. Some artifacts remained in storage for years before they were properly understood. Even now, a few treasures are still undergoing restoration or held back from public view due to their fragile condition. While some items have traveled internationally for special exhibitions, Egypt has remained firm in reclaiming and preserving its cultural heritage. Tutankhamun's afterlife continues, not in darkness, but under lights, cameras, and the watchful gaze of millions. What was once buried in silence is now seen by the world. Before 1922, many scholars believed the Valley of the Kings had revealed all it had to offer. Dozens of tombs had been uncovered. Pharaohs and nobles had been studied, documented, and in some cases, looted long before archaeologists arrived. The golden age of discovery, it seemed, was over. And then came Tutankhamun, a relatively unknown, short-reigned boy king whose name had nearly vanished from history. His tomb, untouched for over 3,000 years, shattered every assumption. It wasn't just the sheer wealth of artifacts, though over 5,000 objects is astonishing in its own right. It was the completeness, a burial frozen in time. No grave robbers, no missing sarcophagus, no gaps in the story. For the first time, the modern world could witness exactly how a new kingdom pharaoh was buried. From ritual tools to food offerings to divine iconography. Tutankhamun's resting place didn't just excite the world, it reshaped Egyptology. His tomb became the benchmark by which all other discoveries would be judged. It inspired a generation of archaeologists, historians, artists, and dreamers. And perhaps most powerfully, it reminded us how much we still don't know. Because despite its beauty, KV-62 is a riddle. Why was the tomb so small for a king? Why was it clearly rushed? Some walls were unpainted, others were still drying when sealed. Was it originally built for someone else? And if so, who? These questions still echo in the stone corridors of the Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun's tomb was supposed to be a footnote in history. Instead, it became a doorway to the past, to the unknown, and to the possibility that other secrets still lie buried in Egypt's sands, waiting for the right eyes, the right moment, and the right hands to uncover them. The boy king, who ruled for less than a decade, left behind a legacy lasting millennia. And it all began with one man, a dusty staircase, and the words, "Wonderful things." If this journey through ancient mystery fascinated you, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to uncover more lost worlds, legendary secrets, and buried truths. Because history isn't dead, it's just waiting to be rediscovered.